Donald Trump and members of administration have been talking about getting rid of FEMA since just days after he started his second term.
FEMA just hasn't done the job, and we're looking at the whole concept of FEMA. We're going to be doing something on FEMA that I think most people agree. I'd like to see the states take care of disasters. Let the state take care of the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all of the other things that happen.
We're going to eliminate FEMA.
4 months later, we are seeing how they are working to do what they said, eliminate the agency without a backup even in place. With hurricane season officially kicking off on Sunday, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is predicting a higher than average number of storms, including 3 to 5 major hurricanes. Now, NBC has new reporting on the scramble inside the agency to keep FEMA alive ahead of hurricane season. Jacob Sovros, a national political and correspondent for NBC News, one of the reporters on that story. Jacob, tell me what you've found about what is going inside this agency that seems to be pretty clearly targeted for destruction.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. I mean, you heard what the president said and what Kristi Noem said. That's very publicly stated opposition to keeping this agency going. But I think that they realized it is fair to say that getting rid of FEMA 2 days before hurricane season, where we are today, would be a very, very, very bad idea. And so the career professionals inside this agency who first pushed the original acting director of the Federal Emergency Management Administration, Cameron Hamilton, who was promptly fired a day after he went up to the Hill and said that he ultimately believed that FEMA was in the best interest of the American people. Now, David Richardson, the new acting director of FEMA, to essentially put a memo in front of Kristi Noem that says there are over 2,600 core employees. That's the acronym they use for the people who lead the rapid response and recovery on the back end of disasters, whether it's a hurricane or a fire or any other mass casualty event. And they're basically signing these people back up, whereas 2 weeks ago, those people may not have been at FEMA or inside this agency at this point. Doesn't mean they've had a full 180 and they're now supporting FEMA. They rejected, as you pointed out, that North Carolina disaster declaration from the White House just a couple of days ago, President Trump did. But some of the key functions, the core functions of this agency are going to remain in place for now. And that is because of pressure from careers inside on the politicals to say, if something goes wrong during hurricane season, effectively, it will be on you, President Trump and Kristi Noem.
So I have to confess, I know a little bit. I've reported on emergency management and disasters a bit, and I know that there's been a lot of, through the years, critiques of FEMA, reforms for it. I mean, because it's such a fraught undertaking, and it's such an important thing to do, and it's often very, very messy. There's lots of folks that have beefs with FEMA one way or the other. I don't think I quite understand why they're so obsessed with getting rid of it altogether.
Yeah, nor do the people inside. I think if you talk to people at FEMA, Chris, they'll tell you FEMA is in need of reforms to the bureaucracy. The way that FEMA, in these major disaster declarations that the president will approve, whether it was Joe Biden approving 100% reimbursement for the LA wildfires or the North Carolina hurricanes, or a bunch of them that President Trump has approved over the course of just the last couple of days, and they were sort of backlogged since the beginning of the administration, perhaps yet another recognition that this agency is necessary. This happens, the formula is determined because of the Stafford Act, and it is by statute. Localities are entitled to 75% reimbursement of all of the money that they spend on these disasters by FEMA. Anything above that, up to 90%, is determined by a formula that's in place. And if these states don't meet the formula, it's up to the discretion of the President of the United States. And there's an ongoing conversation inside of FEMA as to what the right percentage is for states and localities to shoulder on their own, because some in Washington, D.C. feel like it creates more efficiencies on the ground in these localities to move faster, to get the job done quicker. But doing it this way could literally bankrupt states, according to the Biden administration's FEMA chief of staff, Michael Cohen, who I talked to as we reported this article. He said there are states, particularly in the South, that if they don't budget for this, if they don't put this in their state budget, if they don't take out a bond, if they don't increase tax revenue, a major disaster without the supplemental income from the federal government could actually put these states upside down entirely financially, which creates a whole nother disaster of a man-made variety.
You report that Noem has been quietly pushing behind the scenes to keep key employees in place to approve reimbursements to states previously hit by disaster. that there were a bunch, quite notably, that were just sort of getting no response. Missouri, which had tornadoes, if I'm not mistaken, around the St. Louis metro area. Josh Hawley sort of like pleading with Noem in a hearing. It looks like some things have moved there, but again, I got to imagine the people inside the agency, it must be hard to do the normal work you have to do with the amount of chaos and disruption happening inside there.
The analogy that and it's in the story, one current FEMA employee gave me is, it's like running a relay race that you are supposed to have 6 people with 4 people. Yes, they will make it to the finish line, but getting all the way there and doing it in a timely manner is a lot more difficult and a lot more complicated. And that's the situation the Trump administration now has created for disaster response and recovery in the United States of America. It could be a lot easier than it's going to be this hurricane season, but because of what they have done, not only to FEMA, but to NOAA, they got rid of the $1 billion disaster registry. They got rid of all kinds of these National Weather Service meteorologists. It's going to be a whole lot more difficult this season.
Oh, well, fingers crossed here. Jacob Soboroff, thank you. Great reporting.